Hi, I am Igor Smirnov, International Grandmaster and a chess coach, and it's my pleasure to welcome you into this new video lesson. Today we have a very interesting topic: the secrets of strong players. Obviously, strong players have something that makes them stronger, that helps them to gain victories. And you may have noticed that they are not willing to share these insider secrets with other players. There are a lot of video lessons out there recorded by strong grandmasters, but in most cases they just show you some opening moves or some strong moves played in the games of top grandmasters. However, they do not reveal the most important thing: how can they find such strong moves and how can you do the same? And this is exactly what we will be discussing today. Well, of course, I cannot tell you everything within just one lesson, but nevertheless I'll give you a few powerful practical recommendations that you'll be able to implement and improve your results right after watching this lesson. Before we begin, let me make one last note. During a game of chess, you demonstrate your way of thinking. Strong players know the most powerful techniques for finding strong moves. How can they do it? This is what we will discuss during this lesson. In order to illustrate this difference between the way of thinking of strong players and not that strong, let's have a look at one example. In this position, white played rook takes d6, winning a pawn, and black answered queen e5. And perhaps he wanted to block white's e-pawn, and of course at the same time black is attacking white's queen and keeping an eye on white's d6 rook. Now I have a question for you. How would you play here as white? You may pause the video and think about it. I'm pretty sure that most players would just take black's queen on e5. Generally, when you have a material advantage, it's good to exchange pieces. However, in this position it's not the best move. If you have learned my previous lessons, then you already know that to take is a mistake. If white takes black's queen on e5, white helps black to activate his knight and to bring it on a good central square. That's why in such positions it's better to keep the tension and to let your opponent release the tension. And white played king h2. Now you can see this idea clearly. If white takes black's queen on e5, black will activate his knight and will put it on a good central square. And the opposite situation is applicable for black. If black takes white's queen on g3, then it will help white to activate his king and to bring it closer to center. That's why to take is a mistake, and that's why in such cases it's better to keep the tension. In the game, black indeed took white's queen, white recaptured, and now white has an easily winning position. White can bring the king to f4, then push e5, and he has an extra pawn, and black has a lot of weaknesses, so it's totally winning for white. Here we have seen one secret of strong players: a rule to take is a mistake. It may sound simple, but most players do not follow this rule and do not know about it. Actually, they do an opposite thing. They take whenever they can. Actually, it's easy to explain it. Let's have a look at another example. Let's imagine that you are playing black and you're considering the move d5. Which variations do you need to check before you can play this move? Obviously, you need to make sure that you don't lose something. And so you start your calculation and you think to yourself, okay, I'll play d5, he'll take, I'll take with the knight, he recaptures, I take with the bishop, he takes with the bishop, I take with the queen, and now you see that everything is fine, and it means that you may play d5. This is a usual way of calculating variations, and after some practice this becomes your habit. That's why most chess players follow this way of thinking automatically. If they can take something, they start their calculations right from this move. However, strong players have their secrets, and they know that to take is a mistake. Well, let me make one last note. Of course, they don't say that you should never take. Sometimes you can win opponent's material, or you may be forced to recapture in order to keep the material in balance. In those cases, of course, you will take. For instance, let's make a few moves back in this game. For example, after white took c takes d5, of course black has to recapture, otherwise he will just lose material, so there is nothing to think about. Black has no other options but to take. But in this position, white should not take on d5, and this would be a mistake, and white should refrain from making this move, because of the rule to take is a mistake. Actually, I have recorded a separate lesson about this rule, and maybe you even have seen it already. If not, you may find a link below this video lesson, and I think it will be useful for you. And in any case, I believe it will be useful to repeat this material. Okay, now we can move on to the next rule, and let's have a look at the next example. This is a theoretical position of Sicilian defense, neither variation. Let's make a few moves forward. Black played b4, attacking the knight, white retreated, black played queen c7, h4, preparing attack on the king side, and black answered d5, attacking white's center and the e4 pawn more specifically. Okay, and here I'd like to ask you this question: how would you play here as white? As usual, you may pause the video and think about it by yourself for a couple of minutes. I'm very glad if you haven't decided just to take the d5 pawn, because as you already know, to take is a mistake, and in this position this is indeed not the best option. After that, black would recapture with the knight, bringing his piece into center, attacking white's bishop e3 and gaining more activity. So white needs to find something better. As we know, we should try to keep the tension and avoid such moves like e takes d5. However, it's not that easy to find a suitable way to keep the tension and to protect the e4 pawn somehow. White can't play knight g3 because this square is under the control of black's queen. If white plays something like bishop g2, this would place the bishop on a very passive position, and after an exchange the g4 pawn will be hanging, and black can move his knight to c4, so it doesn't look like a very good option for white. And lastly, if white tries move queen d3, it's quite an awkward idea. Black can play knight e5 or knight c5, gaining extra tempos, and it's definitely not what white wants. After all, you may be thinking that if you don't have a good way to defend the pawn on e4, then perhaps you just have to take on d5. This is how most chess players think in such situations. However, it has one major drawback. Everything that we've been thinking about so far in this position was focused on opponent's threats, and we completely forgot about our own plans. Let me bring up an analogy. It's like the tug-of-war competition. Each party is trying to pull the rope into his direction, and the one who does it stronger will win the competition. Similar thing happens in chess. Each player is trying to pull the game into the direction that he wants, and the one who does it more insistently will win the game. Now let's implement this new approach for this position. We need to shift our focus from black's threats to white's plans. Okay, what is the white's plan here? Obviously white wants to push g5. That's why he played h4 and g4 during the previous moves. White can't push g5 straight away, because after h takes, white cannot recapture, the pawn is pinned. Therefore, white needs to prepare this move somehow, and he just needs to think how to solve this problem of the hanging rook on h1. We can find a couple of ideas for this purpose. For example, we can play bishop h3, covering the line. Then after d takes, white will push g5 successfully. And bishop h3 also takes aim at black's e6 pawn. Maybe white will sacrifice a piece there, or white can push g6 and undermine this e6 pawn. All in all, this position looks very promising for white, so this is one interesting idea. Let's go back. At the very least, white can just remove the rook, play rook g1, with the similar ideas of pushing g5 and then g6 and developing attack on the king side. That's another alternative. In the actual game, white finds another move with a similar idea. He played bishop f4, attacking black's queen, and after e5, bishop h2. White covered h-line with his dark squared bishop, and he is still ready to push g5. Of course, black can't take the knight because pawn is pinned, and that's why black took d takes e4 and white pushed g5. Now white is developing his attack, and this is of course a very complicated position, but white has pretty good chances to develop attack successfully. Black should be really careful. For example, in this position, if black makes a natural move knight d5, and he's losing immediately, white can take bishop takes e5 with a discovered attack on black's h8 rook. Okay, let's make a few moves back and observe that critical position once again. After we adopted a new approach, we were able to find a lot of interesting and powerful possibilities for white. You may notice a big difference in the way of thinking of strong players and weak players. Being attacked, weak players think how to defend. Unlike them, strong players try to pull the game in the direction that they want, and they always try to keep focusing on their own plans. We can summarize these ideas by stating the rule, offense is the best defense. Well, I'm sure you've heard this saying many times in the past. However, without a real understanding of this idea, this rule is rather useless. Here I'm not talking about an active defense or a counter-attack or anything like that. Here I'm talking about another approach for the game. It means that you should always try to push your own plan and try to lead the game into the direction that you want. It's not about counter blows or some kind of tactical tricks. It rather relates to your deep understanding of the chess game and adopting the proper approach. Okay, we have learned two powerful secrets of strong players. The first one, to take is a mistake. When there is a possibility for exchange, weak players just use it, they simply take. Unlike them, strong players know that to take is a mistake and you should keep the tension. Being attacked, weak players think about defense. Strong players, on the contrary, follow the rule offense is the best defense. It may sound simple, but this is a very powerful technique. And most players do not follow it. Actually, it's easy to explain it. Let's have a look at our example once again. Let's say you're playing white and the opponent just played b4. You know that you need to move your knight somewhere, and such situations happen very often, and that's why we have this stereotype in our head. If opponent attacked you, you need to defend. However, as you know, it's not exactly correct, and very often you have something more powerful. And at least you can try to find something more powerful. Even in this position, white has an option knight c6, with a double attack of black's queen and pawn making a counter blow. Although it does not work in this particular situation, in another position it could work. And it means that you definitely should not make defensive moves automatically. Now let's train this new knowledge. I strongly recommend that you not only watch this video, but also think by yourself and try to find the best moves by yourself. It's a very good idea to pause the video sometimes and think about the position by yourself first, and only after that resume the video. Of course, right now we will be focusing on the topic of this lesson, on the rules to take is a mistake and offense is the best defense. That's why we will not analyze every move, and that's why I will pass opening moves without analysis. Let's start from this position. Here white played knight h4, attacking black's bishop. Where will you place the bishop? Of course, we should go forward, bishop g4, attacking the queen. Bishop g6 is an option, but it's a passive option, while bishop g4 is attacking the queen. That's why black has chosen this idea. White played f3, bishop h5 and g4. White is still trying to capture this bishop. And now this is another question for you. How would you play here as black? Of course, black can simply retreat to g6, but we know that offense is the best defense and that we should try to find something active first of all. That's why black played knight d5, attacking white's h4 knight with his queen. Now if white takes g takes h5, it will break white's pawn structure and give black excellent attack against white's numerous weaknesses, and that's why instead of that white played knight g2 and black retreated bishop g6. Now here's a new challenge for white. Black is attacking white's knight c3. How can white protect it? Of course, white can protect it with a bishop or with a queen somehow, but we know that offense is the best defense. So you should try to find the attacking move first of all. And that's why white played knight a2, attacking the bishop. Currently it's protected by the knight, but of course white can first take the knight and after that capture the bishop. That's why black retreated. And now white can attack once again, playing e4. You see that white is able to gain extra tempos constantly. Black played knight b6, bishop b3, knight a6, a5. Okay, these are just simple development moves. And black played bishop b4. Okay, now black is attacking white's pawn on a5, and that's another position when white needs to deal with it somehow. What do you think about it? Instead of thinking about black's threats, let's focus on the white's plans. What is the white's plan here? During the previous moves he expanded on the king side, and probably white wants to continue his attack there. And that's why he played h4. Now black has no time for taking the a5 pawn because white will answer h5, capturing black's bishop. Black played h6, giving a free square for his bishop. Now the situation is pretty similar. The white's a5 pawn is still under attack, and white still can use the rule offense is the best defense. So he just kept pushing his own plan and played g5. Ideally black would like to close the position, but here after h5 white can go knight f4 and keep attacking the bishop, and also those pawns are still vulnerable, so it's not that easy for black to keep the position closed. That's why instead of that, in the game he took h takes g5, white recaptured by the bishop. Still black has no time for the a5 pawn because he has to do something about his queen. Once again, you can see power of this rule, offense is the best defense. And if black just moves the queen somewhere, like queen c7 or something like that, then white may continue his attack with the moves like knight f4, h5, and his threats on the king side are pretty strong. Black decided to secure his position and played bishop e7. You see that defense of that pawn on a5 has been solved automatically without any extra efforts for white. White simply realized his own plan on the king side. Now he played queen d2 to protect the bishop. Black played e5, taking white's center. Should white take there or not? Of course not, because to take is a mistake. If white takes there, it will help black to bring his knight on a good central square. White should not do it. That's why white played d5 instead. Black played knight c5, attacking the bishop, bishop c4, rook c8. Okay, in this position white has a lot of moves to calculate. White can take somewhere on e7, on a6, on c6, and for a weak player it would take a lot of time to consider all these options. Strong players knows that you should keep the tension and you should not take, and that's why he simply played rook d1. Black decided to release the tension and take on g5, but as we know, it's very good to let an opponent to make exchange, because in this case he helps you to become more active. In this example, first white placed his queen on more active square, and then he recaptured with a pawn, gaining more space on the king side, getting new h4 square for his knight, and all in all you can see that after black took on g5 it helped white to gain more space and become more active. Okay, black played bishop h5, knight e3, g6, covering f5 square, and here white took on c6 finally. Generally we should avoid such moves, but in this position white has a certain tactical reason for this move. After black recaptured, white took an a6 and go knight c4, and there is no good way for black to protect his e5 pawn and other weak pawns. Black has a couple of weak pawns right now and he cannot protect them. If he tries rook e8, white will play knight d6, making a fork on black's rooks. That's why in this particular position d takes c6 was a good idea for white. As we discussed before, if you can win opponent's material, then of course you can and should take. That's what happened in this game. Black answered f6, g takes, knight takes e5, and white won a pawn. Rook e8. Black is attacking white's knight, and if knight goes away, black will try to grab that pawn on f3. What should white do? What do you think? Of course, white should think about attacking moves first of all, because offense is the best defense, and that's why he played knight to d7. This knight aims at the f6 square. Well, currently it just attacks the rook of course, but if black takes on f3, then after an exchange, bishop takes, taking the rook will go somewhere, let's say rook f1, and then finally white will play knight f6 check, making a fork on black's king and rook. This is losing for black. That's why in the game he made another move. After knight d7 attacking the rook, black simply retreated, rook f7. Now the f3 pawn is still hanging, and what should white do about it? Of course white can protect it somehow, like king g2 or something like that, but instead we know that we should keep pushing our own plan. White was trying to occupy the f6 square, making a fork, and so we can just push this plan once again. White played rook d6, preparing knight f6 check. Black played king g7. The f3 pawn is still hanging, and still we should think about our own plan. Once again, if white wants to occupy the f6 square, then you need to ask yourself, how can I realize my plan? White played e5. Now if black takes pawn with a bishop, then after knight f6, white realized his idea. Now the rook is attacked, and also it interrupts connection between black's rook and the bishop, and thus white can grab the bishop on f3. In the actual game, black did not take an f3 with the bishop, he took with the rook. Now that's not a question for white. Should white trade the rooks or not? Of course not, because to take is a mistake. If white takes an f3, it will help black to bring the bishop into play and protect the c6 pawn, and in generally bring this bishop into more active position. Instead, white can simply take that c6 pawn straight away and attack black's knight on a6. Black played knight b4, white answered rook d6. Perhaps rook c7 was more powerful, but okay, let's just continue with the game. Rook g3, king h2, rook d3. Once again, there is a possibility for white to make an exchange or not to make it. What do you think about it? Yeah, we should keep the tension. We should not take. Instead, we should try to let opponent take. That's why white played knight c5. And now if black takes on d6, white will recapture with a pawn, and this pawn will become closer to the 8th rank. And black just retreated. Now white can push the pawn forward. You see, during the whole game, white does not spend time on defense. Always he's trying to find the way to realize his own plan and to make attacking moves. And thus opponent always have to defend and has no time to realize his own ideas. Here black played bishop g4. He is attacking that pawn on e6. You already know that we need to think about attacking moves, because offense is the best defense. And by adopting this approach, you can find a lot of ideas for white. White can make check on the 7th rank with one of the rooks, like rook d7 or rook f7. And another move, which is even simpler, is rook f4. This is a double attack on black's bishop and knight on the 4th rank. Now black is in a big trouble, in fact he's losing. Anyway, let's look the game until the end. Rook h8, king g2, bishop h3, king f2. Now the rook is hanging. Black played rook e5, taking white's knight on c5. Now of course the white's position is winning, and perhaps there are a lot of ways for a win here, but white used the most appropriate moves. He played rook d7, and he is just using the same idea throughout the whole game, an idea that offense is the best defense. Now black has to remove his king, king h4, king h6, rook h4, check. Black cannot move the king, otherwise he'll lose the rook, that's why he has to play rook h5. You see that white solved the problem of defense of his c5 knight without making any defensive moves. Black had to use his rook for defensive purpose. White exchanged the rooks and then took the pawn. Black played rook c8, attacking that knight on c5. What should white do about it? Of course white shouldn't retreat. White can push e7 and realize his plan. White wants to promote his e-pawn, and he's very close to this goal. Black played knight c6, trying to attack the rook, and now after rook a6, black resigned. On the next move, white will take the knight, deflecting the rook, and then will promote a new queen. We have just analyzed a quite amazing game between two very strong grandmasters. The white player made a lot of sudden and very powerful moves, and what's the most important is that we were able to reveal the secrets of these guys. How can they find such powerful moves? As you can see, when you know the secrets of strong players, everything becomes pretty simple. Although we went through this game very quickly, I'm sure you were able to guess a lot of moves. If this is the case, then please accept my congratulations. It means that you are very close to the level of top grandmasters. Well, okay, I'm kidding, but Nevertheless, I'm sure that if you adopt just these two techniques, it will improve your game quite a lot. Thanks for watching, have a nice day, goodbye. Hello, I'm Igor Spirinov, International Grandmaster and a chess coach. Welcome into the second part of the lesson The Secrets of Strong Players. Some time ago I've recorded the first part of this lesson and I received lots of positive feedback from students about that lesson. That's why I've decided to record a continuation. Before we begin, let me outline what kind of secrets are we talking about in this lesson. Nowadays, there is a wide variety of chess tutorials, and any decent chess player knows all the classical chess rules. For example, you're probably aware of all the common rules like develop pieces in an opening, put a rook on an open file, and standard tactical motifs like bean, fork, discovered attack, and any other common chess rules. Most of the chess players share this knowledge. Nevertheless, stronger players manage to gain victories, which means that they have some additional skills that they use in their games. In most of the cases, they do not share these practical techniques, even if they comment a game or write a book. And that's the point of this lesson. Here I will reveal some of the practical techniques that strong players use in their games. Let's take a look at this example. As usual, I invite you to be active and to think by yourself. In that case, you will indeed improve and develop necessary skills. This is a game between Moiseenko and Lupulescu, if I pronounce his surname properly. It was played a few days ago in the current European Championship, and now you can test yourself in this position. Even though it's still a theoretical position, let's leave the theory aside for a moment and just try to think by ourselves. So what do you think? How would you play here as white? There can be quite a lot of logical moves. White can castle to continue his development, or white can, let's say, push his a-pawn to a4 and a5 to get rid of his weak pawn and disturb his opponent. White can try to break through in the center with something like d5, or maybe white needs to neutralize that active knight on the e4 and take it straight away, or maybe play knight d2. Also, white can try to exploit the black's advanced pawns on the king side and play h4. As you can see, there are a lot of different options. And the same thing will happen in almost any position. Although we know the common chess rules, but in most of the cases, different factors work in single position, while you still need to find the best move somehow. Here is the rule that will simplify your situation a lot. Keep focus on attack. In order to find proper attacking moves, usually you need to focus your attention on opponent's half of the board and think how you can make attacking moves there. Let's try to apply this idea for this position. Which moves white can play on black's half of the board? Not much really. White can only play pawn to c5 or pawn to d5, and both of these options are fine. For example, if white plays d5, he is trying to break through the center, and white is threatening to take the knight or to jump with his knight to d4, attacking lots of squares in black's position, and all in all it may give white a strong initiative. Alternatively, white can play c5, which is also an interesting idea, and it was played in this game. White also is trying to open a position to exploit his two bishops and black's weakened position. If black takes with the c-pawn, it will give the new open line for the white's rook, and white can play rook b1, maybe queen b3 in the future, and it gives white additional attacking possibilities. If black takes with the d-pawn, this will give a new e5 square for white's pieces, for white's bishop or for his knight, and then the knight can jump to g6 potentially in some variations, or white can play f3, pushing away black's knight. This diagonal will also be weak, and white can play bishop c4 or queen b3 in the future, or bishop b5, giving check. As you can see, white now has a lot of different attacking possibilities. Now let's make a few moves back. The main thing that we should notice here is that if you focus on opponent's half of the board and you keep focus on attacking moves, you will be able to find the right moves very easily. Okay, let's go back to the game. Here black played knight to d7. Now white took on to d6. That was the point of his previous move. White wants to open a position and create more weaknesses in black's pawn structure. Okay, in this position, if we try to play attacking moves on the black side, there are no options really. Well, white can move his bishop to b5, but there is no attack there. That's why white simply castled, and black replied h5. Now that's a new position when we need to think and to make the right decision. What do you think about it? What should be the white's move here? Again, white has a few options. Obviously black is going to trap the bishop after h4, and white needs to do something about it. White can take, bishop takes e4, because it will eliminate a defender of the d6 pawn. So this is one option. Another option is that white can give an escape path for his bishop while playing h3 or maybe h4. Maybe white can play knight d2 as well, with the same purpose of getting rid of that knight on e4 and put attack on the d6 pawn. Therefore we have a couple of options. Which one is the best? Again, we need to recollect the main rule. You should keep focus on attack. We don't want just to make a defensive move like h3. We want to make an attacking move. And with that in mind, white played h4. Because it's not only a defense for his bishop, but also white is going to attack black's pawns there on the king side. Once again, you can see that this simple idea of always keeping a focus on just one factor, on the attack, can simplify your game a lot. Okay, now I'd like to tell you one more thing that is also very important to keep in mind and to follow while playing. A little time ago we stated that attacking moves are the best. It means that you should try to play attacking moves by yourself, and at the same time you need to prevent potential opponent's attack, because this can cause real danger for you. That's why before playing moves on the board, before playing the moves that you're going to play, you need to check potential attacking replies of your opponent. How do you do it? Very simple, you use exactly the same method of thinking. Let's try to think about this position from the side of black. How would black try to attack if he wants? He will use the same method. He will focus his attention on white's half of the board and will think which attacking moves he can play there. With that in mind, black has a few options. He can take on h4, maybe play g4. The knight can take on g3. Maybe black can push f4 as well, but it's probably bad because it will leave the e4 knight hanging and white can just take it. Thus, in total we have three options: g4, g takes h4 and knight takes g3. These are the moves that black player will calculate and will try to play, if one of them works. Now, we're playing white, so you just need to think about these options before playing h4. So let's flip the board back to the white side. If you're playing white, then before playing the move h4, you need to calculate those potential attacking replies of your opponent. In most of the cases, you can make such calculations very quickly. For example, obviously g takes h4 causes no danger for white, you just recapture and it only helps you. Similarly, if black plays g4, obviously white can just remove his knight and the position on the king side is closed. There is nothing black can do, and it's easy to detect that there is no danger here for white. We also need to calculate knight takes g3 move, pawn takes. Here if black pushes g4, we have seen that situation already, it closes the position, there is no danger for white. Instead, black will probably try to open a position, so he can take on h4. And in addition to that, he can also take on f3. That's another move on white's half of the board that black can do in order to eliminate a defender of that h4 pawn, and after that he can win a pawn by g takes h4. So this is a line that you must calculate before playing h4. Here you need to evaluate this position and think whether it is dangerous for you or not. In this particular example, although black won a pawn, but he has no active pieces at all. He's trying to attack just with his pawns, while all his pieces are still on their initial positions. So I don't think it may be bad for white. Actually, it should be bad for black. White just needs to open up a position, playing like e4. Maybe white may even consider a sacrifice like bishop takes f5. The move in the style of Mikhail Tal. Something like that, and even such sacrifice may be dangerous for black, because then white is going to make checks, queen g6, queen e4, and attack black's weakened king. Of course, it requires additional calculation, but in any case, we can detect that this line should not be dangerous for white. After you made such calculations, you can come to a conclusion that you may play h4. But you see that it's important to make these calculations before playing this move, because otherwise you can overlook opponent's powerful attack and appear in huge troubles. And that's what happens very often with chess players. Now you know how to prevent it. Okay, let's move forward. In the game, black played queen to e7. This time white needs to think again to detect the best move. One of the obvious options is to take on g5, and that is a possible option indeed. In the game he chosen another option, he took on to e4, and it's important to state here that this is not a defensive move, that's an attacking move. White eliminates a defender of the g5 pawn, and on the next move he is going to capture it. That's why again you can see that white keeps focus on attack. That's the reason for the move bishop to e4. And that's why black has to recapture with a bishop, otherwise he will lose a pawn. White played queen to e2. Well, white has to do that because he needs to protect the knight, otherwise black will take the knight and will take on h4. That's why queen e2 is forced. Black replied g takes h4. Okay, now that's a question for you. White has two moves, knight takes h4 or bishop takes. Which move is better? The answer is easy, the attacking move is better. And bishop takes h4 is a direct attack. That's why this should be the move that you consider first. Once again, before playing this move on the board, you need to check potential attacking replies of your opponent. What is a potential attacking reply of black? We need to focus your attention on the white side of the board and think which attacking moves black can play there. So black can play bishop takes f3. And this is the line that you need to calculate. So bishop takes h4, what if bishop takes f3 here? And this position you can recapture by the queen, and all of a sudden black's a rook is in danger. There is no way for black to protect it, and thus white is winning, and black may not play the move bishop f3. In the game he played knight to f6. Okay, that's not a position when you need to think. How would you play here as white? Focus your attention on the black side of the board and think which attacking moves you can play there. With that in mind, you will find a few options. White can play queen to b5 check or knight to g5. Well, white can take bishop takes f6, but it doesn't do much, it's just an exchange. You can see that although the position is complex, unbalanced, you can find the right moves very easily if you keep the right focus. After queen b5 check, black probably just can reply queen to d7, covering his king, so that's not a big problem for black. While knight g5 is more aggressive, we're attacking the bishop, and white is potentially putting pressure on the e6 pawn, and this move looks pretty good. Now, of course, you may say that the bishop onto e4 is already protected. That's true, but still in this position the e4 bishop is very powerful. It controls the whole board, it looks at the white's king, and therefore we may say that white is threatening to take the bishop, because it will eliminate black's most powerful piece. For example, if I play any move for black, just anyone to see the white's idea, white will take the bishop, f takes, and now let's say f3 to open up the position, and black's situation is very difficult. Probably he's just losing. You see he has no active pieces on the board, and he experiences troubles with his knight and with numerous weaknesses. In the actual game, after knight g5, black retreated with bishop to c6. He's covering the b5 square as well, trying to prevent potential queen b5 check. Okay, what should white think about here? What do you think? There are no immediate attacking moves on black's side of the board, therefore white should prepare them. The moves that white may consider here, I think, is maybe e4, because white can play this move using a pin, or maybe c4, and on the next move white will be ready to break through in the center. In the game he chosen the move c4. Now white is ready to destroy the black's position with d5 at some point. Maybe even knight takes e6 first, and then d5 using a fork. As you can see, even here white still keep his focus on black's position and on the ways to make attacking moves there. Another thing that is important to mention is that here, before playing c4 on the board, you need to check potential aggressive replies of your opponent. For this reason, you need to focus your attention on your half of the board, on white side, and think which moves black can play there. So let's think about that. What if white plays c4? Which attacking moves black can play? On the white side, black can try maybe knight g4 or knight e4. Knight g4 is not dangerous because there is no threat. If black goes knight e4, well, of course there are many things white can do, but at the very least white can play f4, protecting the knight, and it means that this position is safe for white, and you may play c4. So that's how you should think in a real game, before playing moves. If you follow this way, you will prevent blunders, you will avoid them completely, and you will prevent any unpleasant surprise from the side of your opponent. So white played c4, and in the game black indeed replied knight to e4. Here, as we discussed, at the very least white can play f4, supporting his knight. But of course we would prefer to make more aggressive moves, to make attacking moves, and that's why white took the knight. This is an attack on black's queen. Black took the bishop, now white took the pawn, and king to e7. Okay, that's now the task for you. How should white play here? What do you think? Obviously black is attacking white's knight on d6. White can retreat with knight to b5 or to play c5, but it's not what we want, because we want to keep our focus on attack. So the question that you need to ask yourself is, how can you attack black? How can you play a move on black's side of the board with some kind of attack? White answered this question to himself and played d5. And this is indeed the best idea. White counterattacks black's bishop, and of course black cannot take, because it will allow a very powerful fork. In the game black played rook to g8. What should white play now? What do you think? Here it's obvious that black is concentrating forces against white's king, and white needs to be careful. That's why here, as usual, before playing a move you need to check which attacking replies black can play. For example, if white will be careless and capture black's bishop, black will play rook takes g2, which is the only attacking move actually, and then rook to g8 check, and on the next move white will be mated. It's over. Let's go back. In the game white played f4, covering the g2 square. Black answered bishop to a8. What should white do now? Well, ideally white still wants to play attacking moves on black's half of the board. With that in mind, we may consider something like c5, or maybe d takes c6, or maybe even e4, attacking black's position. However, these options do not look very good, because the knight is hanging onto d6, and we shouldn't forget about that. For example, if white takes onto e6, creating knight takes f5 threat, black can prevent it very easily by simply capturing the knight, and there is nothing white can do. White can make one check, rook d1, but black will take king takes c6, and it's over. The move like c5 would be very good in some other position, but here probably it's not, because black can play bishop takes d5, bringing his bishop back to life. And that's why in this position white does not have good attacking options and he has to retreat. He played knight to b5. Black answered rook g3. What do you think now? What should white do? At first sight it may seem like black has no big threats, because even if he plays rook g8, attacking your pawn, you can play rook f2 and you're covered. And that's why it's quite likely that some players would play something like knight to d4 here, attacking black's position. At the same time, as we know, before playing moves on the board you need to check aggressive replies of your opponent. So let's make this check. If you play knight to d4, now we need to focus your attention on the white's half of the board and think which moves black can play here and which threats black can create here. If you follow this way of thinking, you will find the powerful way for black very easily. Black can go rook g8, attacking white's g2 pawn, and after white replies with rook f2, black has another attacking move, rook to h3, and black is winning. It will look like this. And there is no good defense against rook to h1. After revealing black's tactical threat, white played rook to f3, and now black's attack is over. He played e takes d5. What do you think now? As usual, we need to think about attacking moves. There are not so many that white can play. C takes d5 is a move onto black's half of the board, but here black will recapture, and it only helps black to activate his bishop. As for other possible attacking options, white can go knight to d4, threatening knight takes f5 fork. It's one good option. In the game he played queen to b2, which is another possible idea. White has now a lot of diagonals for his queen to penetrate into black's position and attack black's king, and white won the game pretty soon in a few moves, just because black's exposed king has no defense and the black's position is destroyed. We will not look this game until the end. If you want, you can find the link for the PGN file in the description of this video lesson. Right now it's important just to make the general conclusion about the proper way of finding right moves when you play a chess game. The general rule is quite simple yet very effective. you should keep focus on attacking moves, both on your own attacking moves and on the attacking moves of your opponent. When it is your turn, you focus on your attacking moves and you think about the opponent's half of the board and how you can play the attacking moves there. In most of the cases you have only a few such options, and therefore you'll be able to find the right move very easily. There will be no need for you to check 10 different moves candidates. You will just select between a few possible options. Very often each of these options is good. So that's how you think when you need to find correct move for you. But before playing this move on the board, you need to check attacking moves of your opponent. Here you use exactly the same way of thinking, just this time you think from the side of your opponent. And that's why you focus attention on your half of the board and you ask yourself which attacking moves your opponent can play there. Similarly, in most of the positions there will be only 1-2 possible attacking moves. You will check them quickly and this will make sure that your position is safe and the move that you are going to play is correct. You will avoid blunders, avoid any unpleasant surprises from the side of your opponent, and you will make sure that your results are stable and you prevent annoying losses when you just overlooked a powerful shot of your opponent. If you keep only this one rule in mind while playing, you can improve your results quite a lot. Well, of course I'm a little bit simplifying the situation because we cannot narrow down the art of playing chess to just one rule. And, of course I cannot cover everything within just one short lesson. If you want to know all of the important things that you need to keep in mind while playing, you can study my course, The Grandmaster's Positional Understanding, where I describe the whole situation. But nevertheless, you shouldn't be deceived by simplicity of this rule. It is very powerful. And if you keep this in mind while observing the games of top grandmasters, you will be able to understand the reasons of moves that they play. And if you play Blitz games, this idea will help you a lot, because in Blitz you need to play quickly, you don't have time to think about lots of things, and here if you focus your attention on just this one rule, you'll be able to play correct moves in most of the times. Well, that's what I wish to you. As usual, you're welcome to write your impressions and your results in comments below the video. Thanks for your attention, I wish you all the best, and talk to you in the next lessons.
That's what we are. We're just professional killers on the chessboard. My name is Maurice Ashley and I'm an international grandmaster of chess. People say I can't play chess and I just look at them like, that's ridiculous. I teach 5-year-olds and 6-year-olds, so you probably can learn how to play. I think that the most successful people are, even if they don't play, great chess players. When other people may not know what to do, may get scared, you're still super cool and dealing with the situation for what it is. Checking out who are the pawns in the game, who are the rooks in the game, the knight. Who do you need to really talk to? That's the king that's going to make the decision. You have to always be on the lookout for your opponent. The grandmasters are almost psychologists. I'll look up all the history they have, their games. I might even want to know what they eat for breakfast, because styles matter. What you might do in a given situation matters. There are some players who are very aggressive. They want to attack first. You put them in a boring position where not much is happening. They're like a tiger in a cage, and then they might do something that's fatal to them. And the other players who are very cautious. They don't want to see complications. They want to be solid and quiet. You put them in a chaotic state, and they're like, oh my God, it's too much, and then they'll crack. I believe chess is a discipline masking as a game. You learn through failure when you play chess. You're not going to play the perfect game all the time. In fact, no one plays perfect games, even the best players in the world. So we learn from our failure. And that's empowering, to know that you can make a mistake, you can study that mistake afterwards, own up to it, and then just get better from it. And to go from on your back, think you're gonna lose, it looks over, to fighting back, creating ideas, confusing your opponent, just like crushing him. I mean, there's nothing like that. And it just goes to show that with fortitude, with tenacity, with determination, you can overcome pretty much anything. And chess gives you that opportunity every single time you play.
Hey everybody, we're back to get our vision checked. A little bit of a special video this week because it dawned on me that perhaps more than just watching yours truly go through the vision test on chess.com and maybe offering some quick tips along the way, if we're lucky, actually talking about how you can build this muscle and what some of the exercises you can do, some of which I'm hoping to develop into products and features eventually on our site, chess.com, and some that you can do on your own if you're actually an ambitious chess player looking to push the ceiling on your own ability to calculate, whether it's play blindfold games or to just visualize and keep track of things in your head. So one of the first things I want to stress is that visualizing the board, and when you close your eyes, not just seeing random green and white squares or black and white squares, but actually knowing, you know, the spacing and the presence of every square and where they are in correlation to the pieces you're imagining moving in your head is very important, because it's something that is what truly governs whether or not you make blunders or not. I've said this before, but I want to elaborate on why. Often what ends up happening in a calculation sequence is that at a certain point somebody loses track of where something is, whether it's the opponent's piece on a long file or diagonal or even up close, or they forgot they took a piece, or you just spend time after a few moves trying to evaluate, do I feel positionally better here, strategically, did this help my plan, whatever, and less on where are the concrete placements of the pieces now, and are there any new tactics that weren't there before. New tactics being missed is what you end up seeing in the middle of that line, right? So you commit to the line, and then 2-3 moves into the line, actually playing the line with your opponent, you're like, oh wait, I can't keep going for this because at the end of this line I'm losing. That happened in the beginning of the commitment to the variation. And so that's why you want to work on this. So some tools I recommend you do with a partner especially, or if you're a coach, a dad, a mom, a dad, a coach, anybody who cares about the success of another young person, one exercise I recommend is you can hang a chessboard above their bed, or every night before they go to bed have them close their eyes and go through what all the squares are, so that you know it's not just a parlor trick or random guesswork. You can push them at first to remember the colors of the squares, and then eventually the full diagonals, then eventually come up with routes of the pieces, until eventually you can challenge them to do an exercise that the Soviet chess school did often, that I was actually taught by Grigory Kardonov, and I'm going to display all of those for you here. So first thing you can do, I just did a test here. I did a 30 for 30. It was pretty good. Not my best work, but 30 for 30 is not bad. What we're going to do now is actually bring back the coordinates and actually throw on my adorable little blindfold here, because hey, everybody needs a branded blindfold, and I want to prove to you that this is about remembering the coordinates. If I can make this thing fit on my head, I think I can, my big head. So it's about remembering the board beyond just this vision trainer, right? We all love when we do the vision trainer and it says B1 or G8 or whatever, right? So you're guessing it, but you can use your eyes, and our vision trainer helps build that muscle as far as your speediness, and the faster you get, the more you should be able to do, which should reflect your full board awareness. But here's an exercise you can do to start. So pretending you guys ask me, so G5, black, right? Name D8, H4 diagonal. I go D8, E7, F6, G5, H4. And now you guys can see that I know the board, right? So we start with F1, F1, E2, D3, C4, B5, A6. Name B1 to H7, B1, C2, D3, E4, F5, G6, H7. Move a knight from G1 to G8 as quickly as possible. So knight on G1 moves to, there's several ways to do it, knight to F3, knight to E5, knight to G6, knight to E7, knight to G8. I think that's the fastest. We could also go knight H3, knight F4, knight H5, knight F6, knight G8. I think that's the same route. Move a knight, move a queen from E1 to A8 as quickly as possible. You go queen E1 to E4 to A8, or something like this. Now, the exercise you can get to eventually are two things. One, the first Soviet exercise I'm going to give you is visualize that there's a queen on D5, okay? I wish I had highlighted this before, because now I'm blindfolded. These are real world problems here, right, everybody? So let me highlight this for you, just so you know. Oh, I can't use highlights on our vision board. Imagine the queen on D5, black queen on D5, and I have a white knight on A1. So move the knight to every square on the board without ever touching a square that is attacked by the queen on D5. So for example, if I had a knight on A1 and I moved it to B3, that loses. But how can I get my knight to C1 if I don't go to B3? Well, the other access point is obviously E2, because A2, D3, and B3 are all taken, right? So let's see. We start with a knight on A1. Put a few seconds on the clock. Let's see how fast I can do this. So knight on A1 goes knight to C2, knight to A3, knight to B1, knight to C3, knight to E2, knight to C1. Knight back to E2, C3, B1, A3, C2, B4, A6, C7, E8, F6, H7, F8, G6, E7, C8, B6, A4, B2, back to A4, back to C3, back to B1, back to A3, back to C2, back to E3, back to C2, back to E1. Let's see. Let's go back to C2 to E3 to F1 to G3 to F1 to H2 to G4 to F2 to H3 to G1 to E2 to F4 to G6 to H4, back to G6, back to H8, back to G6, back to F8 to H7 to F6 to G4 to F2, back to G4 to H2. From H2, let's go to F1. Knight to G3, not sure I named that one yet. Knight back to F1, knight to E3, knight again to C2. And then I think back to A1. Did I get them all? I think I did. So you have to bring the knight back when you're done. That's part of the rule. So if we had another partner here highlighting the squares as I spoke, it might be a little easier. But I think I followed the route. And the point is, you can challenge yourself to do this faster and faster. And if your opponent or partner ever steps on a square, you can buzz them, maybe even with like an electric shocker like Bill Murray uses on the Ghostbusters, right? Hashtag that's going to be the worst remake ever. Did anybody ask for a remake of Ghostbusters? The answer is no. Anyway, so this is one exercise. Now let's talk about another exercise where you can actually make it progressively more difficult. We start out with, let's say, a bishop on D5, a rook on G2, and a knight on F4. Okay, they're all the same color. Now, what you have to do is name every piece that is defended or attacked by one of your pieces. So in this case, we would name rook on G2 and bishop on D5, because the knight on F4 hits the bishop on D5, and the bishop and the knight both hit the rook on G2. But if we move the rook in this position from G2 to G7, now the only piece we would name is D5, the bishop on D5. So you need a partner for this because you need them to challenge you. If you're moving these pieces yourself, by definition, your brain is sort of locked in and you're sort of subconsciously choosing a square that's either safe or protected, depending on whatever you choose that round. So you need somebody to tell you, rook to G7, and now knight to H5, and here you would say rook on G7, because now the bishop isn't defended anymore. Then the rook moves to A7. Now you would say none, or you would say pass if you're playing this game with a partner. And you see how quickly you can do it. And then eventually, let's say we have this knight on H5, bishop on D5, rook on A7. Let's add another piece, bishop on E3. Now you say rook on A7, because there's a bishop on A3. And so you push yourself, and then after that, the knight goes to F4. So now you say knight on F4, rook on A7. Then the rook goes to A3, and you say bishop on E3, knight on F4. Oh, sorry, and bishop on D5. That's right, because the knight came back to F4. So the point is, this sort of keeping track. If somebody was really challenging you, and imagine now add a few pieces, and I'm moving the pieces all over the board. Remember, we initially started with rook on G2, knight on F4, bishop on D5. But as the pieces are being moved all over the board, your ability to keep track of those things in your brain is very reflective to your ability to calculate a really long combination and not make any sort of blunders. We see top players make blunders like this all the time in Blitz and Rapid, right? They make a combination and they forgot that a piece was defended, that it wasn't defended before. And so at the highest level, even all games are eventually lost because of a mistake at some point in this way. You could say maybe it's a mistake on a 30 move deep level where someone misevaluates where a piece is and it has to do with a strategical weakness of a pawn, or it can be a blunder. But either way, eventually something is lost because of your ability, or inability to calculate properly, to keep things organized, and to properly anticipate your opponent's threats, which is what visualization is all about, properly anticipating your opponent's threats so that you can execute your plans and not misplace or miscalculate what might eventually happen to you. So there you go. There's my little speech for today. Oh my God, I look like a badass with that bandana, Daniel LaRusso. Right, look at that. Let's do that. Right, that's a good GIF. If somebody makes a GIF of this, you're awesome. Anyway, so let me do one exercise while you guys can see it here. We'll see if I can do a little more than 30. Let's hide the coordinates. Let's go back to showing no coordinates so we can start fresh. Ready, set, go. G5, A2, H4, H8, A6, G8, B1, E4, H5, C2. Going slow. I feel like I'm going slow. I feel like I'm going slow. Go faster, Danny. You are so old. I was clicking F3. Okay. But we got 31 out of 31. And this is more just like a speed, kind of challenge for yourself to try to recognize how well you're doing. Full board awareness, right? And then of course you can bump up to moving not just the squares but the pieces too. And so this video though was much more about really giving some valuable takeaways to my followers. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, share it with your friends, and know that at some point, for those of you who are premium members and are like, Danny, stop giving away all your really in-depth teaching advice. Just go back to playing bullet brawls and being an idiot. Save those for chess.com. But more and more, we have more and more video lectures on chess.com that are so in-depth by so many great authors. I'm really just trying to do everything I can to help, let's just get more and more good chess content all over the web, and not just keep all the awesome premium stuff at chess.com, but also everywhere that people can find it. So please enjoy this. Please enjoy this. You're going to do whatever you want. So thanks for watching. I'll just say that, and then we'll go ahead and bring the video to an end. Thanks.
There is a myth that grandmasters can see 10, 15, 20 moves ahead. And it's a great myth because I'm a grandmaster and it makes me look like a super freaking genius. But the truth is, in just the first 4 moves, there are 318 billion ways you could play. Now, that'd be cool if I could pull that off, but grandmasters just can't. It's too much. So we use different techniques to be able to look ahead. And some of these techniques include chunking, which means taking a group of a chess position and seeing what possibilities can come from just that group. Or pattern recognition, which is just going over a lot of positions that look very similarly and extrapolating truths from that. The stepping stone method, which is to take a position, freeze it in your mind, and go from there to guess the next position. But one of my favorites that I love to solve these kind of chess puzzles is called retrograde analysis. And what you do with retrograde analysis is that in order to look ahead, it pays to look backwards. Now, why is this so useful? Well, in chess, it's a very complicated case. You've got all these chess pieces, it's 32 pieces, but after 5 moves, the position starts to evolve a little bit, and then the game starts to go on, and you see the chess position get a little simpler and a little bit simpler and less pieces on the board, until finally, in this case, a game that I played in a tournament in Foxwoods, it gets to something like this. When great players play, it often gets to something like this. You don't see like some easy early checkmate, grandmasters see through all that stuff. What you see is some endgame, something really, really simple. And we like to study things like this, grandmasters do, so that if we get to them, we know how to play them cold, but also so that we can steer the position that's in front of us, the more complex ones you saw earlier, to something this easy, something this simple. So in this way, when you're dead, I already knew like 10 moves ago because I knew where we were going. Now, why is this so effective? Well, it's something about the human mind. The problem with the human mind, we're very logical creatures. So I want you to play along with me a few games. Take a look at this sentence. Now, most of you read a sentence the second time around will realize that you missed the word the first time around. Your mind is very logical. It proceeds forward. It just ignores anything that breaks with its logical stream. And so you don't see the word the first time, the second the first time you read it. But if you read this sentence backwards, you would automatically catch it. You'd go backwards, and then you get to brain, and you get to then you say, whoa, there are 2 thes in the sentence. This is a really cool trick for proofreading papers. You know, you're writing a paper, and then there's like these silly mistakes. Why are these mistakes in my paper? You read it backwards, you'll catch all of them. All right, let's go on to this problem, an interesting problem. Bacteria that double every 24 hours fill a lake it has infested after precisely 60 days. On what day was the lake half full? Now, a lot of people seeing this problem, they think 30, like, you split it in half. Well, that's not the right answer. And also, people might want to calculate. It's too big, it's math, it's boring, I don't want to do that either. But if you do this problem backwards, you get the answer right away. What's the answer? 59. Obviously, you start at the end, you go backwards, it's like, oh yeah, it's half full. The answer is 59. Here's another puzzle, a little bit more complicated. You have 6 numbers, 1 through 6. The cards are face down. You and I are going to pick a card. You pick a card and you look at it, it says the number 2. I look at my card, I think about it for a minute, and I say, I want to trade. The reason I want to trade, we're going to trade to see who has the highest number at the end. Do you trade with me? Most people say, of course, I got a 2. 2 sucks. They're 4 numbers higher. Probability says I'm going to do better. Wrong answer. You're playing a grandmaster. You start from the back and you work it out. If I had the number 6, would I offer to trade? Of course not. I'm not dumb. What about the number 5? Probably not either, because you're not going to say yes if you have a 6. Well, if 5's not going to trade and 6 is not going to trade, 4 is going to be like, I'm not trading either, because 5 and 6s don't trade. So you see what happens as we work backward. 3 is going to realize 4, 5, and 6, they don't trade. So the offer is definitely a 1, and all of you who said yes, thanks for your money. So this retrograde analysis is used in different places. It's used to prove intoxications hours after an alleged DUI by Pennsylvania police officers, which is kind of cool. Well, it means don't drink and drive. The use of retroanalysis is used in law, science, medicine, insurance, stock market, politics, career planning. But I find its use to be a more interesting place. Maybe one of the most interesting uses is in this movie, which I know a lot of you know, The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, where Brad Pitt plays a guy who's living his life backwards. And what this movie makes me think of is that great quote that quote you often hear from people who are older, that youth is wasted on the young. Well, if you can see the end game, your youth will not be wasted on you. Thank you very much.
हेलो वेलकम बैक। स्वागत है आप सबका। मैं दीपक कुमार गौड़, मोटिवेशनल स्पीकर। आज मैं आपके लिए कुछ ऐसा टॉपिक लेकर के आया हूं जो आपके दिमाग को ना एनर्जेटिक बना देगा। देखिए, ये एक ऐसा टॉपिक है, एक खेल के बारे में आज हम डिस्कस करेंगे। वो खेल है शतरंज का खेल, जिसको इंग्लिश में चेस बोलते हैं। क्या बोलते हैं इसको? चेस। देखिए, ये चेस होता है ना, ये माइंड का बहुत डेवलपमेंट करता है। ये चेस के गेम की इंपॉर्टेंट बात यह है, इसको खेलते टाइम बिल्कुल बोर नहीं होते। पहले मैं आपको चेस के गेम के बारे में थोड़ा बताता हूँ, फिर इस गेम को आपकी और मेरी लाइफ से कनेक्ट करूँगा। इसलिए वीडियो को ध्यान से देखिए, बिल्कुल एंड तक देखिए। देखिए, आज आप इस वीडियो को एंड तक देखेंगे ना, तो आज आपके लिए पावरफुल नॉलेज मिलने वाली है, गारंटी है मेरी। देखिए, क्या है शतरंज का खेल, चेस का खेल। देखिए, ये जो चेस का खेल है ना, इसको 2 प्लेयर खेलते हैं एक साथ चेस बोर्ड पर। इसमें 64 खाने होते हैं और 8x8 मैट्रिक्स होता है। देखिए, हर खिलाड़ी 16 मोहरों के साथ इसमें खेलता है। और देखिए, इसमें एक राजा होता है जिसको किंग बोलते हैं, एक रानी वजीर होती है ना, उसको क्वीन बोलते हैं, और 2 घोड़े होते हैं, घोड़े को नाइट बोलते हैं, और जो हाथी होता है ना, उसको बोलते हैं रुक। 2 हाथी होते हैं, और इसमें 2 ऊंट होते हैं, उनको बोलते हैं बिशप। और 8 सिपाही, और जो ये 8 सिपाही है ना, इनको पॉन बोलते हैं। क्या बोलते हैं इनको? पॉन। देखिए, ये जो 16 पीस है, टोटल 16 पीस है, 16 मोहरे हैं। इनको ना 3 कैटेगरी में डिवाइड किया गया है। फर्स्ट कैटेगरी है वॉर्न टैलेंटेड कैटेगरी। क्या है पहली कैटेगरी? वॉर्न टैलेंटेड कैटेगरी। देखिए, ये कुछ मोहरे ऐसी होती हैं जिनके पास पहले से टैलेंट होता है, जैसे ऊंट, हाथी, घोड़ा और रानी, इनके पास पहले से टैलेंटेड होता है। देखिए, कौन? क्वीन, नाइट, रुक और बिशप। देखिए, ये पहले से टैलेंटेड होते हैं और इनके पास ऐसी कुछ क्वालिटी होती है जो चेस बोर्ड में किसी के पास नहीं होती। सेकंड कैटेगरी है ग्रेटनेस थर्स्ट अपॉन कैटेगरी। देखिए, ये कैटेगरी में ना राजा आता है, और जो ये किंग है ना, राजा एक ऐसा पीस है चेस बोर्ड के अंदर, इसको बोल सकते हैं मोस्ट यूजलेस पीस। क्या बोल सकते हैं इसको? मोस्ट यूजलेस पीस। देखिए, इसका कुछ काम नहीं है, यहाँ तक कि ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा 1-2 मोहर को गिराएगा, 1-2 पीस को गिराएगा। और ऐसी सिचुएशन होती है इस राजा की, अगर एक पॉन मतलब सिपाही राजा के पास आ जाता है ना, तो राजा को अपनी पोजीशन को चेंज करना पड़ता है, बदलना पड़ता है। लेकिन जो ग्रेटनेस थर्स्ट अपॉन कैटेगरी है ना, इसका मतलब क्या है? इसका मतलब है किंग के बिना, राजा के बिना चेस गेम इज नॉट पॉसिबल। देखिए राजा के बिना चेस गेम पॉसिबल नहीं है, इसलिए इसे बोलते हैं ग्रेटनेस थर्स्ट अपॉन कैटेगरी। अब ये थर्ड कैटेगरी है ना, थर्ड कैटेगरी है नो ग्रेटनेस कैटेगरी, व्हाट एट एबिलिटी टू बिकम ए ग्रेट कैटेगरी। देखिए ये कैटेगरी में ना कौन आता है, पॉन सिपाही आते हैं। देखिए ध्यान से सुनो, एकदम ध्यान से। ये सिपाही के पास ना कुछ भी टैलेंट नहीं होता, कुछ भी स्किल नहीं होती, लेकिन अगर गेम को ध्यान से खेला जाए ना, अच्छे से खेला जाए, तो यही पॉन सिपाही एक अच्छे सुपर पावर में चेंज हो सकते हैं, अच्छे कैटेगरी में आ सकते हैं। ध्यान से सुनो, आपको एकदम अच्छे तरीके से बताता हूँ। ये जो सिपाही होता है ना, सिपाही 1 स्टेप एट ए टाइम चलता है और स्टार्टिंग में 2 स्टेप चलता है। देखिए ये अगर धीरे धीरे ना, अगर धीरे धीरे स्टेप इन रहो, मतलब सीधा, अगर सीधा चला जाए 1 स्टेप 2 स्टेप 3 स्टेप 4 स्टेप 5 स्टेप और 6 स्टेप, और जब तक 6 स्टेप तक चला जाएगा ना, तो पॉन हैज द एबिलिटी कि वो अपने आप को एक मोस्ट पावरफुल पीस ऑफ द चेस बोर्ड के अंदर ट्रांसफॉर्म कर लेगा। देखिए आपको एक बात याद है, आपको मैंने कुछ बोला था थोड़ी देर पहले कि इस गेम को आपकी और मेरी लाइफ से कनेक्ट करूंगा। अगर आप इस कनेक्शन को समझना चाहते हैं ना, तो ध्यान से अच्छे से समझो। आपको एक बात पता है, ये जो हमारी लाइफ है ना, बिल्कुल चेस बोर्ड की तरह। देखिए दुनिया में 3 तरह के लोग होते हैं, फर्स्ट वन टैलेंटेड लोग, और सेकंड होते हैं ना, वो होते हैं ग्रेटनेस थर्स्ट अपॉन कैटेगरी के लोग, और जो थर्ड कैटेगरी के लोग होते हैं ना, वो सबसे ज़्यादा होते हैं, वो मैक्सिमम होते हैं। इस कैटेगरी के लोग होते हैं नो ग्रेटनेस कैटेगरी के लोग। कौन से कैटेगरी के लोग? नो ग्रेटनेस कैटेगरी के लोग। देखिए ये कैटेगरी में ना मैं आ गया और आप भी आ गए, और उधर चेस में जो सिपाही होता है ना, वो भी नो ग्रेटनेस कैटेगरी में होता है। आपको पता है वो क्या करता है? देखिए वो क्या करता है, चैलेंज को एक्सेप्ट करता है। चैलेंज को एक्सेप्ट करने के बाद में प्रॉब्लम को सॉल्व करता हुआ पॉजिटिव एटीट्यूड के साथ में आगे बढ़ता है। देखिए आपको और मुझे क्या करना है लाइफ में, पता है? आपको और मुझे क्या करना है लाइफ में? चैलेंज को एक्सेप्ट करके, चैलेंज को एक्सेप्ट करके प्रॉब्लम को सॉल्व करते हुए और लाइफ में आगे बढ़ना है पॉजिटिव एटीट्यूड के साथ। और उधर जो चेस में सिपाही होता है ना, वो धीरे धीरे 6 स्टेप पर पहुंच करके सुपर पावर में कन्वर्ट हो जाता है, ट्रांसफर हो जाता है। देखिए आपको और मुझे धीरे धीरे मेहनत करके लाइफ में चैलेंज को एक्सेप्ट करके प्रॉब्लम को सॉल्व करते हुए, फेस करते हुए और पॉजिटिव एटीट्यूड के साथ में सक्सेस को पाना है। अब मैं आपको पूरी बात को ना बिल्कुल क्लियर करता हूँ, अच्छे से समझना। देखिए 1-2 मिनट का वीडियो है, और इस वीडियो को ना बिल्कुल ध्यान से देखना, बिल्कुल कंसंट्रेशन से देखना कि एक पॉन जो सिपाही होता है ना, वो कैसे कैसे धीरे धीरे सुपर पावर में ट्रांसफर होता है, सुपर पावर में कन्वर्ट होता है। तो आइए देखते हैं वीडियो को। अब आया वीडियो देख करके समझ में। देखिए जो सिपाही है ना, इसके पास स्टार्टिंग में कुछ भी नहीं था, कोई स्किल नहीं था, कोई टैलेंट नहीं था, लेकिन इसने क्या किया, चैलेंज को एक्सेप्ट किया और प्रॉब्लम को सॉल्व किया और पॉजिटिव एटीट्यूड के साथ में आगे बढ़ा। देखिए ऐसे ही आपको और मुझे पॉजिटिव एटीट्यूड के साथ में चैलेंज को एक्सेप्ट करके, प्रॉब्लम को फेस करके और पॉजिटिव एटीट्यूड के साथ में आगे बढ़ना है, लाइफ में सक्सेस को पाना है। एक क्रांतिकारी गोल्डन स्टेटमेंट है, ध्यान से सुनना। इफ यू डोंट सी योरसेल्फ एज ए विनर देन यू कैन नॉट परफॉर्म एज ए विनर। देखिए एक बार और, इफ यू डोंट सी योरसेल्फ एज ए विनर देन यू कैन नॉट परफॉर्म एज ए विनर। ये आपके लिए हिंदी में बोलता हूं। देखिए अगर आप अपने आप को एक विजेता के रूप में नहीं दे सकते ना, तो आप विजेता की तरह परफॉर्म भी नहीं कर सकते। इसलिए अपने आप को एक विजेता के रूप में देखिए, सी योरसेल्फ एज ए विनर। आपको पता है चेस हमें कुछ सिखाता है। देखिए कुछ ऐसे बेनिफिट है जो हमें चेस से सीखने चाहिए। देखिए आपको मैं एक एक करके सारे बेनिफिट्स को बताता हूं। देखिए फर्स्ट बेनिफिट है चेस हैज द पावर टू ब्रिंग पीपल, और सेकंड बेनिफिट है चेस टीचेस कि हाउ टू विन एंड हाउ टू लूज। थर्ड बेनिफिट है चेस हेल्प चिल्ड्रन realize the consequence of their action, और फोर्थ पॉइंट है इट हेल्प्स यू द फोकस। देखिए आपको ये फोकस करने की पावर है ना, उसको स्ट्रांग करता है। और पांचवा बेनिफिट है चेस इज द ग्रेट एजुकेशनल टूल फॉर द स्कूल। और सिक्स्थ बेनिफिट है ये आपकी क्रिएटिविटी को ना डेवलप करता है और ये आपको कॉन्फिडेंस बिल्डर बनाता है। देखिए और आठवां बेनिफिट है ना इसका, ये है कि आपकी जो प्रॉब्लम सॉल्विंग की स्किल है ना, इसको स्ट्रांग करता है, मजबूत करता है, डेवलप करता है। और नाइन्थ बेनिफिट ये है चेस ना ये हमारे ब्रेन की जबरदस्त एक्सरसाइज करता है। और जो लास्ट बेनिफिट है ना वो इंटरेस्टिंग है, ध्यान से सुनना। ये ना हम जब अंडर प्रेशर में रहते हैं ना, तो उस टाइम में हमें कैसे क्लेम किया जाता है, कैसे उस अंडर प्रेशर से निकला जाता है, वो चीज सिखाता है। आपको पता है चेस हमें ये सिखाता है जिंदगी में आगे बढ़ने के लिए कभी कभी पीछे हटना पड़ता है, कभी कभी पीछे जाना पड़ता है। देखिए एक इंपॉर्टेंट बात यह है, कभी कभी जो चीज होती है ना, जो सबसे ज्यादा लगाव हो जाता है किसी चीज से, जैसे रानी से हो जाता है चेस में, देखिए उस चीज़ से हमें कभी कभी सेक्रीफाइस करना पड़ता है। देखिए जिंदगी में आगे बढ़ने के लिए सेक्रीफाइस करना बहुत जरूरी है। भागवत गीता के एक श्लोक के माध्यम से इस वीडियो को एंड करूंगा। देखिए अर्जुन ने कृष्ण से पूछा, भगवान ये मेरा मन है ना, इसने बहुत मेरे को डिस्टर्ब करके रखा हुआ है, इस मन को ना कैसे कंट्रोल किया जाए। तो कृष्णा ने आंसर दिया, असंशय महाबाहो मनोदुर्गिनम चलम अभ्यासेन्तु कौन्तेय वैराग्यञ्च गृह्यते। श्री कृष्ण ने कहा, असंशय महाबाहो, हे महान शक्तिशाली भुजाओं वाले अर्जुन, वैसे तो तुम्हारी महान शक्तिशाली भुजाएं हैं। देखिए इसमें कोई डाउट नहीं है, इसमें कोई डाउट नहीं है। अनडाउटली ये जो मन से बनाए हुए बिलीफ सिस्टम है ना, इनको नहीं तोड़ पाओगे, लेकिन अगर इनको फिर भी तोड़ना है ना, तो दो काम करने होंगे, अभ्यासेन्तु कौन्तेय वैराग्यञ्च गृह्यते। अभ्यास और वैराग्य। देखिए क्या, अभ्यास और वैराग्य। अभ्यास का मतलब है डूज और वैराग्य का मतलब है डोंट्स। अभ्यास का मतलब है करनी है और वैराग्य का मतलब है करनी है। देखिए ऐसी कुछ बातें हैं जो हमें करनी चाहिए और जो नहीं करनी चाहिए ना, उन चीज़ों से वैराग्य करना चाहिए, उन चीज़ को छोड़ देनी चाहिए। देखिए कितना इंपॉर्टेंट बात है। और जो चेस में हमको सिखाया ना, चेस हमको क्या सिखाता है, देखिए आगे बढ़ना और जो इंपॉर्टेंट है, और चैलेंज को एक्सेप्ट करके प्रॉब्लम को सॉल्व करके पॉजिटिव एटीट्यूड के साथ में आगे बढ़ना है। और वैराग्य किससे, वैराग्य ऐसे नेगेटिव लोग जो मंत्र शकुनी जैसे कैरेक्टरिस्टिक के लोग होते हैं ना, उन लोगों का साथ जल्दी से जल्दी छोड़ दो। उन लोगों का साथ छोड़ेंगे तो सक्सेस जल्दी मिल जाएगी। इसलिए अभ्यासेन्तु कौन्तेय वैराग्यञ्च गृह्यते। आपको पता है मैं हिंदी और इंग्लिश मिक्स करके वीडियो क्यों बनाता हूँ, क्योंकि मेरे देश के कुछ गाँव, कस्बा, तालुक, तहसील और जिला और छोटे छोटे शहर के कुछ नौजवान हैं जिनको मैं एम्पावर करना चाहता हूँ। मैं आपकी मदद के लिए इस यूट्यूब चैनल पर लगातार ऐसे मोटिवेशनल पावरफुल वीडियोस बनाता रहूँगा। देखिए चैनल को सब्सक्राइब करके बेल आइकन को दबाइए। बेल आइकन को दबाएंगे तो आपको नेक्स्ट वीडियो का अपडेट मिल जाएगा, और बेल आइकन को नहीं दबाएंगे ना तो आपसे नेक्स्ट वीडियो चूक जाएगा। इसलिए बेल आइकन को जरूर दबाइएगा। वीडियो देखने के लिए बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद। इस वीडियो को फेसबुक और व्हाट्सएप पर शेयर जरूर करिए। देखिए आप फेसबुक और व्हाट्सएप पर शेयर करेंगे ना, तो सामने वाला सोचता है यार क्या नॉलेज वाली वीडियो सेंड करिए। देखिए आपको एक बात बताता हूँ, जो नॉलेज वाली वीडियो होती है ना, उससे मनोरंजन नहीं होता, मनोमंजन होता है। क्या होता है उससे, मनोमंजन। इसलिए ऐसी नॉलेज वाली वीडियो को सेंड जरूर कीजिए, शेयर जरूर कीजिए। जय हिंद, स्टे ब्लेस, बी इंस्पायर्ड।
Most of the time I was self-taught, in the sense that I taught myself by playing chess, because this infrastructure of coaches and trainers and even just availability of material was so limited in those days in comparison to today. I mean, nowadays there's just so many resources online. A lot of things are messed up in your head till you play a few times, and then you suddenly get this clarity, because that pressure, the tension at the board is very hard to recreate otherwise.
Sometimes even if nothing seems to be working, it's very important to at least keep hanging in there and wait for your chance, because there will still be one.
If you've gone 2 hours thinking you're going to win, and then suddenly the tables have turned completely. The recommended approach is to be so cold and almost surgical and say, well, those 2 hours didn't happen. I'm now lost, and this is the point I'm starting. Or you can reverse this. You could have been lost, but you'll feel a bit down, and then suddenly the tables can turn in your favor. So the thing is, any unexpected change in result, you must always deal with the current situation. And there are people who are outstanding in this. I would say I was good in it. For me, the pursuit of excellence, it's really about staying calm and realizing that most of the things you worry about never happen.
Once again, I would ask of you to be up to listen to the national anthem of India.
When Mr. Clark, a Scottish farmer, heard that the luxury cruise liner Titanic was to make its very first voyage, its maiden voyage, from the United Kingdom to the United States of America, he had a dream to be on the ship with his wife and his 5 children. He practically spent most of his life's savings to buy tickets for his entire family. Non-refundable tickets. Guess what? Just a week before the Titanic made its way to America, one of Mr. Clark's son was bitten by a dog. The doctor recommended that the boy be quarantined for his own safety and for the safety of others around him. Mrs. Clark suggested that he and the other children actually make their way on the trip. But Mr. Clark's conscience did not allow him to leave his wife and his ill son behind. Wednesday, the 10th of April, 1912. As the Titanic sailed forth from the Southampton port in Hampshire, England, Mr. Clark stood there crying tears of disappointment and frustration. All his money was gone, and none of them could make their way on the trip. Just 5 days later, on Monday, the 15th of April, when Mr. Clark heard news that the Titanic had sunk, having collided with an iceberg, he started looking for the dog. कुत्ता किधर है? कुत्ते को माला पहनाना पड़ेगा, कि पूजा करनी पड़ेगी, प्रणाम करना पड़ेगा. अगर बेटे को कुत्ता नहीं काटता, तो हम सब कट जाते. Ladies and gentlemen, isn't it amazing how many plans we make? And isn't it a reality? Not everything goes according to our plans. Even in the game of chess, we may come completely prepared with our strategy to win the game. We may even make our moves thinking that everything will go according to what we had decided and planned. The reality, however, is once we have made our move, we have no control over the moves that the opponent will make. We have no idea that the opponent has also made his or her plan. Whether it's the game of chess or the game of life, not everything goes according to what we had envisioned in our lives. This is exactly why there's a great need to go with the flow, to not be rigid about what we had decided, to learn to change our strategy as per the need of the moment. Ladies and gentlemen, adjust your plans, adapt to the challenges that life throws at you, adopt new strategies to match those of your opponent. Life, apply the greatest virtue of flexibility. Don't be rigid. Let's learn a very important lesson from the river Ganga as she emanates from the Himalayan mountains with her plan to move and reach her destination. She is not rigid. She is extremely flexible. As sometimes mountains throw challenges in the form of rocks on her path, she does not stop. She will either go above them or under them, around them, but she keeps moving until she reaches her destination. Whatever challenge comes on your pathway, just keep moving. Thank you. Many times I say, some people are so poor, so absolutely poor that all they have is money. If you want to truly know how rich and wealthy you are, then drop a tear and say, how many hands actually come forth to wipe that tear? Ladies and gentlemen, our true wealth, our true richness is people, our connections with people, our interpersonal relationships with people. Isn't it often said that our net worth is equal to our network? And when it comes to networking and our connecting to people, very often we just have the tendency to connect to a network with those apparently big guys, the more important ones, or as they call them, the big guns? And isn't it true that we do not want to rub shoulders with the apparently less important or the smaller guys? Even in the game of chess, if we simply network with the king or the queen or the bishop or the knight or the rook, and we do not pay attention to connecting and networking with these little pawns, who's going to play the role of the pawns? Even those little guys in the front are important. They play their respective roles to bring the ultimate victory to one who plays chess. And thus, whether it's the game of chess or it's the game of life, if we want victory and success, we have to connect with people at all levels, from big to small, from president to resident. We have to network, connect, and have interpersonal relationships with everybody. A group of 70 scientists were working on a project as a deadline. These 70 scientists were so absolutely under pressure because of their hectic work and the deadlines. They were really finding it hard, but they were so loyal to their boss, they just kept going. One morning, one of the scientists came to the boss and said, "There's an exhibition in town and I promised my children to take them for the exhibition. Is it okay if I leave at 5:30? The boss said, "We're really working on a deadline, but since you've promised your kids, you can actually leave at 5:30. The scientist was happy. He continued to work in his office, and when he looked at his watch, he had been so involved and absorbed in his work, he saw it was already 8:30 p.m. Oh, he felt so guilty that he had promised his kids that he would take them for the exhibition, and he hadn't gone home at 5:30. He came to his boss's cabin and saw the boss was not there as well. The scientist packed his bag and came home. His wife was sitting in the living room reading magazines. He knew that the situation was extremely explosive. Anything he would ask or say would just boomerang back. His wife looked at him and said, "Would you like to take a cup of coffee, or would you like to go for dinner straight?" He said, "Well, if you prefer coffee, I don't mind taking a cup of coffee. But where are the kids?" The lady said, "At about 5:15, your boss came home and took the children for the exhibition. What had happened is at 5 o'clock, the boss had come and seen that the scientist was so absorbed and engrossed in his work and had completely lost track of time. The boss knew that he wasn't going to leave office at 5:30. The boss personally went to the scientist's home and took the scientist's kids for the exhibition. Now, the boss didn't have to do this again and again. Even that one time he did it and made that investment, the kind of commitment that came from all the scientists that worked under him was incredibly amazing. This is why all these 70 scientists worked with such commitment at Thumba under their able, capable, and super sensitive boss. Guess who the boss was? Late Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam, the former president of India, the mastermind behind the space research and the missiles project of India. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, greatness is not just about rubbing shoulders with the big guys. The true symptom of greatness is how we treat the apparently small and the least amongst mankind whom we work with. Therefore, if we truly want to achieve success, we must connect to the big and the small at all levels. We must treat them all with respect, dignity, and sensitivity. Thank you. Cosmetics and knowledge are very similar. Both do well only when they're applied. Cosmetics, when applied, can change our looks, and knowledge, when applied, can change our life. The principles, the wisdom, the techniques that we learn from our coaches, our trainers, our gurus in our respective areas where we want to excel can only fulfill our dreams and make us successful if we apply them with one pointed attention and focus. I remember when I was a little boy, I somehow happened to discover the power of a magnifying glass. I called one of my friends and I told him that I'm going to show you the magical power of a magnifying glass. I remember sitting in the sun with him, taking the magnifying glass and focusing the magnifying glass on the backside of his palm. And the more pointed the focus became, this guy yelled because it burnt his hand. When the same sun's rays are focused through a magnifying glass, they have the potency to burn your hand, they have the potency to burn a piece of paper. When the same sun's rays which are scattered are focused through a solar panel, they can heat water, they can cook food. Ladies and gentlemen, when our mental energies are scattered and all over the place, we may have knowledge that our coaches and trainers give us, but we cannot actually see that knowledge bring success to us. Just like a magnifying glass, we have to minimize all distractions and bring that one pointed focus to be able to achieve success, whether the game of chess or the game of life. What we learn will only bring us success when we minimize our distractions, focus and apply ourselves 200% to what we have learned. When Tiger Woods, the famous golfer, was asked, "What is the secret of your success?" Tiger Woods said 3 words: practice, practice, practice. And what's the practice all about? The practice is all about minimizing the distractions and maximizing our focus. When we minimize all the distractions and maximize the focus, whatever we do in our lives, whether it's a sport, whether it's academics, whether it's spirituality, whether it's personal life and discipline, whatever we do in our life, we will certainly achieve success in that particular area of life. Virat Kohli did not hit a sixer in the maternity ward. Cristiano Ronaldo did not start hitting goals in the maternity ward. Vishwanathan Ananda did not come in the maternity ward and started to play the game of chess. They got trained under an expert master, a coach. They minimized their distractions. They increased their focus. They practiced. They applied themselves. And this is why they excelled and came to the level of success that they are experiencing today. Recently, a gentleman asked me, "You travel so much, you're constantly on the go, you're moving around all over the place all the time. When do you actually prepare your lectures?" I told him, preparing a lecture is not a very big deal. I read so much, I hear from my colleagues, I interact with people so much, and on all my travels I get so much experience. Don't they say that the best stories of your life are found between the pages of the passport? You put all of this together and within a short while you can prepare a fantastic talk. So realistically speaking, working on a talk is a very small part of the deal. Working on myself is a large part of the day, to be spiritually inspired, to be intellectually nourished, to be emotionally satisfied. That's the large part of the day. Because it's not our words or our works that create an inspiring impact on the people whom we serve. It's who we are, our experience, how we feel internally is what we are actually giving people. And this is why, like in the game of chess, if we want to win the game, we can't always just move forward. Sometimes we have to move backwards to be able to get that time to rejuvenate and revitalize ourselves, to be able to actually get that time to reflect and strategize how to move forward with double the force and double the impact. Don't we always find that when an arrow is shot, it's pulled backwards so that when it is shot, it can go with its full potential and double the force towards its target? And in order to take that step backward, we could do it in two different ways. I call it conscious opportunities or crisis opportunities. Conscious opportunities means we know that it's important to step backwards and work on ourselves. We give it the necessary priority. Don't they say where attention goes, energy flows? So we consciously create that opportunity to take a break. We take a break before we break down so that we can come back with inspiration to relaunch ourselves. And then there is crisis opportunities, which means when crisis happens, when calamity happens, we transform that crisis into an opportunity to work on ourselves. Steve Jobs, when he was chucked out of Apple Incorporation that he himself had formed and established, he loved his work. In that time he worked on himself. He found the love of his life and made that relationship strong. He created Pixar and Next Animation. And when Apple hired him back, he came back with double the force. This is how we find the kind of incredible technology that Apple has been able to contribute to the world. Winning the game of life or winning the game of chess means not to just keep moving forward, but also to move backwards. I say always, moving backwards is not a sign of weakness or cowardice. I feel it's the greatest expression of wisdom. We press the pause, not because we want to pause. We press the pause because we want to press the play and come back with double the energy, double the force, and double the impact in order to achieve what we want to achieve in our lives.
नमस्कार दोस्तों, मैं निखिलेश जैन चेसबस इंडिया के इस यूट्यूब चैनल पे आप सभी का स्वागत करता हूँ। दोस्तों, आज मैं आपके सामने अपनी एक कविता लेकर के आया हूँ और कविता उन सभी भारतीय शतरंज खिलाड़ियों को समर्पित है जिनकी वजह से आज भारत का तिरंगा दुनिया भर में लहरा रहा है। तो आइए सुनते हैं यह कविता। उम्मीद है आपको भी यह कविता मैच के दौरान प्रेरित करेगी। कविता का शीर्षक है अब बढ़ना है तो बढ़ना है, किससे आखिर अब डरना है। तो शुरू करते हैं। अब बढ़ना है तो बढ़ना है, किससे आखिर अब डरना है। अब सोच नहीं, अब सोच नहीं, उम्मीद नहीं, अब सोच नहीं, उम्मीद नहीं, अब जोश नया, उत्साह नया। मत सोच गलत, मत सोच बुरा, अब हर दुश्मन, अब हर मुश्किल, हर बार हरा, हर बार हरा। अब बढ़ना है तो बढ़ना है, किससे आखिर अब डरना है। तुझमें क्षमता है, तुझमें क्षमता है, फिर क्या डरना। फूटा है फिर उम्मीदों का झरना। तुझमें क्षमता है फिर क्या डरना, फूटा है फिर उम्मीदों का झरना। तू जीतेगा, हाँ तू ही जीतेगा, हर पल मन में ये राग जगा। अब बढ़ना है तो बढ़ना है, किससे आखिर अब डरना है। अगर कोई मुश्किल आ जाए, फिर काले बादल छा जाएं। अगर कोई मुश्किल आ जाए, फिर काले बादल छा जाएं। मन में ईश्वर को ला कर के, मन में ईश्वर को ला करके तू बढ़ता जा, तू बढ़ता जा, अब बढ़ना है तो बढ़ना है, किससे आखिर अब डरना है। तो समर्पित है यह कविता उन सभी शतरंज खिलाड़ियों को जो कि भारत का तिरंगा ऊंचाइयों की ओर लेकर के जा रहे हैं। और मुझे लगता है कि आप सभी भी अगर इसे अपने मैच के पहले एक बार सुनेंगे तो आपको ऊर्जा ज़रूर महसूस होगी। धन्यवाद मुझे सुनने के लिए। चेस बेस इंडिया के लिए मैं निकलेश जैन, जय हिंद।
Most people don't reach their dream, not because of failure. Most people don't live their dream because they give up. You see, it's not the failure that stops us, but that most stop at their first failure. Those who succeed don't stop at one failure. They don't stop at 10 failures. They don't stop at 100, 1,000, or 1,000,000. They say, this is my goal, and I will do whatever it takes to achieve it. I will learn the lessons from any failures. I will learn faster. I will work harder. I will work smarter. And I will not quit until my dream is a reality. That's the difference between success and failure.
Failure is a massive part of being able to be successful. You have to get comfortable with failure. You have to actually seek failure. Failure is where all of the lessons are. You know, when you go to the gym and you work out, you're actually seeking failure. You want to take your muscles to the point where you get to failure because that's where the adaptation is. That's where growth is. Successful people fail a lot. They fail a whole lot more than they succeed. They extract the lessons from the failure and they use that, the energy, and they use the wisdom to come around to the next phase of success. Gotta take a shot. You have to live at the edge of your capabilities. You gotta live where you're almost certain you're gonna fail. The reason for practice. Practice is controlled failure. You're getting to your limit, getting to your limit, getting to your limit. You can't lift that, you can't do that, until you get to the point that all of a sudden your body makes the adjustment and then you can do it. Failure actually helps you to recognize the areas where you need to evolve. So fail early, fail often, fail forward.
Failure makes winners stronger. Failure makes winners hungrier. But it makes most give up. It makes most feel worthless. Winners don't enjoy failure, but they would never let failure stop them. Next time you encounter failure, you got to remember every great thing on this planet is here because the Creator learned what did work, but learned more from what did not work. When we are kids, we don't stop at failure. When we first learn to ride a bike, it's failure after failure. We get knocked down time after time, but we get up and push forward until we achieve our goal of riding the bike. But then we get old and most of us get weak. We are too soft to get back on the bike. We come up with excuses. It must not be for me. No, you just soft. No, you just lazy. Tell yourself the truth. Get back on the bike. Learn why you failed and make sure you don't fall again. Make sure you are stronger for having the lesson.
You know, it's always a little bit frustrating to me when people have a negative relationship with failure. Fail early, fail often, fail forward.
You're here right now at this moment because tomorrow you want to be somebody greater than the person you are today. You see yourself succeeding, you have a vision, you have a dream. Congratulations. You're already 10 steps ahead of 95% of the world. Imagine if Michael Jordan was scared of missing. He would have never taken a shot. Imagine if Steve Jobs was afraid of people not liking his product. there would be no iPhone. So ask yourself this. Do you want to be a person who fears failure, or do you want to be a person who loves success? Which one? Because you're going to have to pick today. And I'll tell you one thing. One is a failure, and one is a success. And if you love success, there is nothing that can stop you. All those negative things people say will mean nothing. They're going to talk about how only 1% make it to the top. Big deal. Want to know something else? Only 1% stick with that fitness program long enough to see results. Only 1% of nerds stick with that video game long enough to get good at it. Only 1% of relationships stick it out to the end. That doesn't mean you have a 1% chance. It just means you can't behave like the 99%. You'll have to do something better than giving up a month from now. Those are just numbers. You want to talk about numbers? Take a look around you and take a good look around you. Are you like 99% of the people around you? If you are, then you're in the wrong video, my friend. You have to love success just as much, because that's what's going to allow you to get up and go for it. Being scared to fail won't do anything. In fact, when you love success and you start going for it, guess what happens? You're gonna fail. You're gonna fail 10 times, 100 times, maybe even 1,000 times. But that's okay. Failure isn't permanent. Falling isn't permanent. You get right back up and keep going. And this time, you're gonna be stronger, wiser, and you'll be more driven than ever. And for every 10 failures, you'll land 1 success. You have to love success so much that you're willing to fail 10 times before you can succeed once. That's how a winner does it. I want to explain the biggest myth that most people think leads them to success. And here's the myth. You might believe if you're scared to fail, you won't fail. Lies. Biggest myth ever. And I believed it. You see, I always thought that being scared to fail in life would literally keep me from failing. I would look at the losers around me and I would say, shit.
You know, a lot of people come up to me and they ask me, Marco, what is it that motivates you most? And to answer their question, I reply back with a question. I say, what if I told you that you had 1 week left to live? Would you regret not pursuing your dreams, passions, and desires? Would you regret not living your life to the fullest? Would you regret not spending as much time with your family, friends, or loved ones? You know, Steve Jobs said in a speech one time that he used to wake up every morning, look in the mirror, and ask himself questions like this. And he said that if the answer was yes for too many days in a row, then he knew that he had to change something. And that should go for all of us. If you're living a life that you would not be okay with losing because you weren't able to do things you wanted to do, then now you know that you need to change something. Life is simply too short and unpredictable to not live exactly the way that you please. It is ridiculously unpredictable. It is possible that on any given day to die at any point throughout that day without ever being able to see it coming. You know, when I was 13, I had this teacher who was an absolutely amazing person. I'd known him for several years then, and he had 2 kids, a loving wife. He was a man of God, contributed to the community. He gave us everything that he had, and he would bike to school every single day. I always remember him coming to school on his bike, and one morning on his way to school, it was early in the morning, he was crossing an intersection. A reckless driver comes out of nowhere, hits him, he dies on the spot, on the moment of impact. His death taught me so many valuable things in life, and one of them being that it went on to show that no matter how much you don't deserve to die, and no matter how good of a person you are, and no matter what your situation is, no matter anything, it goes to show that death is inevitable and random, and it will eventually consume each and every single one of us, whether it's in 50 years, in 10 years, next year, or even tomorrow. You cannot control it. The people around you cannot control it. As long as you're at the wrong place at the wrong time, your whole life could disappear in the blink of an eye, along with everything you wished you could have done. Whether you're walking down the street, whether you're stepping into the elevator, whether you're walking down the stairs, whether you're just existing. Listen, you'll see people from nowhere die of a heart attack. Gone. No family history, no symptoms, no causes, nothing. It happens, and that's the cruel life that we live in. And it's something that we cannot control. So what I want to make clear is that regardless of the path that you take in your life, at one point, death will consume you. It doesn't care whether you floss your teeth in the morning, whether you raise a family or not, whether you go on to be rich, poor, a success, a failure, whatever. You are still going to die at one point. It is that simple. And knowing that you're going to die soon should be the biggest motivation to both make the difficult decisions in life and to get your ass out of bed in the morning. So now the question becomes, what is it that you truly have to lose?
I like to think of life as a game of chess. The board is the world you live in, and the pieces are the people in your life. There are nearly an infinite number of ways a game of chess can be played, and no two players ever play the same way. Everyone has their own strategies and their own goals. Some play for money, some play for fun, others play to compete. Regardless, the game always starts the same way. First move. Everyone's first move is different, and they're usually pretty simple, and yet the first move can change the course of the entire game. No matter what you do, no matter how well thought out your plan is, you will lose pieces. Friends, family. Sometimes, you'll lose your most valuable piece. The game isn't over. When people lose things that are precious to them, they tend to forget what they play for. They lose focus, they make mistakes, and eventually, they lose. No one is a perfect player. I guarantee you that at some point, you are going to lose. But I think what makes a good player isn't whether or not they win or lose. It's whether or not they get back up on that board. But I think the most important part of any game is to know what you play for. Because that's what's going to get you through the hard times. The checks. The checkmates. You need to find something that motivates you. Something to keep you going. And keep playing. Just keep working at it. Be patient. And one day, eventually, you will win.
आगे बढ़ेगा. It is as simple as that. Visualizing a chessboard
शेक्सपियर गेव अ वेरी ब्यूटीफुल एग्जाम्पल. शेक्सपियर ने कहा चेस बोर्ड के ऊपर एक साइड टोटल 16 पीसेस होते हैं, बराबर. अब इन 16 पीसेस को 3 कैटेगरी के अंदर डिवाइड किया है. ध्यान से समझना. पहली कैटेगरी जिसमें कहता हूं बॉर्न टैलेंटेड कैटेगरी, मतलब कि वो 16 पीसेस के अंदर कुछ पीसेस ऐसे होते हैं जो बॉर्न टैलेंटेड होते हैं. फॉर एग्जाम्पल वो 2 हाथी, 2 कैमल्स, 1 क्वीन, जो बॉर्न टैलेंटेड है उनके पास नेचुरली कुछ ऐसा क्वालिटी है जो पूरे डाइस के अंदर किसी के पास नहीं है. पहला कैटेगरी बॉर्न टैलेंटेड. सेकंड कैटेगरी ग्रेटनेस थ्रस्ट अपॉन कैटेगरी किंग. किंग ऐसे कह सकते हो लाइक किंग मे बी द मोस्ट यूजलेस पीस ऑफ द चेस बोर्ड. कुछ काम का नहीं है इतने हद तक कि पूरी गेम के अंदर मैक्सिमम टू मैक्सिमम शायद और शायद 1 या 2 को गिराएगा. और ऐसी सिचुएशन उसकी होती है कि इवन अगर एक पॉन मतलब कि एक प्यादा भी अगर नजदीक आ जाए तो भी उसको उसकी पोजीशन चेंज करनी पड़ेगी. ग्रेटनेस थ्रस्ट अपॉन का मीनिंग ये होता है कि येट विथआउट दैट किंग के बिना गेम ऑफ चेस इज नॉट पॉसिबल. उसे ग्रेटनेस थ्रस्ट अपॉन कहते हैं. थर्ड कैटेगरी नो ग्रेटनेस कैटेगरी बट येट एबिलिटी टू बिकम ग्रेट कैटेगरी. वो 8 पॉन 8 प्यादे. अब ये वही समझ सकेगा जिन्होंने एक बार लाइफ के अंदर कभी भी चेस खेला हो. वो 8 प्यादे, उनके पास कोई टैलेंट नहीं होता, कुछ नहीं होता, बट ध्यान से समझना. लेट्स से 1 स्टेप एट अ टाइम, और लेट्स से स्टार्टिंग में अगर मैं कहूं कि 2 स्टेप एट अ टाइम और बाद में 6 स्टेप इन अ रो 1 2 3 4 5 6. द मोमेंट वो 6 स्टेप ट्रैवल करेगा, बाद में एंड में अगर वो पहुंच गया तो पॉन हैज द एबिलिटी कि अब वो अपने आप को वन ऑफ द मोस्ट पावरफुल पीस ऑफ द चेस बोर्ड के अंदर ट्रांसफॉर्म कर सकता है. अग्री? ओके दोस्तों, हमारी लाइफ सेम टू सेम इस चेस बोर्ड की तरह है. इस दुनिया में 3 टाइप के लोग होते हैं. एक बॉर्न टैलेंटेड, दूसरे ग्रेटनेस थ्रस्ट अपॉन, लेकिन मैक्सिमम लोग वो थर्ड कैटेगरी में जाता है, नो ग्रेटनेस कैटेगरी, 2 स्पॉन. उसके अंदर मैं भी आ गया, आप भी आ गए, काफी सारे लोग भी आ गए. नो ग्रेटनेस कैटेगरी. बड़ी एट जिस तरह से पॉन हर रोज एक स्टेप आगे बढ़ते एक टाइम ऐसा आ जाता है अपने आप को ट्रांसफॉर्म कर देता है. उसी तरह से वी बीइंग अ ह्यूमन अगर हर रोज अपने आप को इंप्रूव करे, हर रोज अपने आप को डेवलप करे, हर रोज अपने आप को बेटर बनाए, तो एक टाइम ऐसा आ जाएगा जब एक ऑर्डिनरी पॉन, एक ऑर्डिनरी इंसान अपने आप को ट्रांसफॉर्म करके वन ऑफ द मोस्ट पावरफुल पीस ऑफ द प्लेनेट के अंदर ट्रांसफॉर्म कर सकता है.
मैं करीबन 7 या 8 साल का था, तब मेरे फादर ने मुझे गेम गिफ्ट करी, चेस। उसके बाद में मेरे सर पे ऐसा भूत सवार हुआ करीबन 7 या 8 साल के लिए, तब मेरी एज होगी करीबन 7-8 ईयर्स। उसके बाद में करीबन 14 से 15 साल की एज तक मैं डेली मिनिमम 2 से 3 घंटे चेस खेलता था, कभी अपने फादर के साथ, कभी अपने फ्रेंड्स के साथ में, और पागलों की तरह खेलते थे हम। मतलब कि क्या कर रहे हैं कि अगर शाम को खेलना शुरू किया, 3 घंटे हो गए और चेस की गेम बीच में अटकी हुई है, एंड में मेरी एक रानी रह गई, उसकी एक रानी रह गई, और बस उसी में लगे हुए हैं। एक हाथी मेरा रह गया और एक राजा रह गया, उसका भी एक हाथी और एक राजा है, अब लड़ते रहो। तो क्या करते थे कि रात को 9 बज गए, उधर से मम्मी की डांट आनी शुरू हो गई कि बेटा सो जा, कल स्कूल जाना है, ये है वो है, उधर से डांट पड़ रही है। तो बड़े ध्यान से हम उस चेस को गेम को उठाते थे और ले जा करके एक जगह पे रखते थे, और अगले दिन स्कूल से आने के बाद में 4 बजे वापस से उसी लेवल से वापस से गेम शुरू। उस टाइम पे जो चेस खेल रहा था, देखा जाए तो क्या है, उसकी क्या इंपॉर्टेंस है आज की डेट में हमारी सोसाइटी में? इंपॉर्टेंस किस चीज़ की है? किस चीज़ की है कि आपको IIT में एडमिशन मिल जाए, IIMs में एडमिशन मिल जाए, आप पढ़ाई में टॉप कर जाओ, आप ये कर जाओ, वो कर जाओ। आप किसी को बोलोगे भैया अपने बच्चे को जाकर के चेस खिलाओ, उसकी ज़िंदगी बदल जाएगी, लोग हंसेंगे, उन्हें ये क्या बोल रहे हैं, पागल है क्या? लेकिन मैं आपको बिल्कुल सच बोल रहा हूं, बिना किसी फिल्टर के, बिना किसी लेयर के, कि हुआ क्या, ये चेस को खेल खेल करके कि जहां स्कूल में मैं अपने ध्यान को 5 मिनट के लिए भी एक क्लास में नहीं रोक पा रहा था, मतलब 90% से ज्यादा क्लासेस में नहीं रोक पा रहा था, 10% क्लासेस ऐसी थी जहां पर ध्यान रुकता था, कुछ अच्छे थे, कुछ अच्छी क्लासेस भी थी। तो उसके बाद में क्या हुआ कि यहां पे चेस खेलते खेलते बाय डिफॉल्ट एफर्टलेसली खेल खेल में ऑब्जर्वेशन पावर्स अपने आप ही बढ़ गए। मतलब आप नहीं भी चाहोगे तो आपको अपने ध्यान को उस गेम में 2 घंटे तक, 3 घंटे तक, 4 घंटे तक लगा करके रखना ही पड़ेगा अगर आपको खेलना है। तो कोई दूसरा ऑप्शन ही नहीं है। यह नहीं हो सकता कि आप सामने किसी के साथ में खेल रहे हो और माइंड में कुछ और सोच रहे हो, नॉट पॉसिबल। तो उससे क्या हुआ, ऑब्जर्वेशन पावर्स बढ़ी। दूसरी चीज क्या बढ़ी, चेस एक ऐसी गेम है जिसके अंदर बोथ दी साइड्स ऑफ आवर ब्रेन, मतलब कि राइट ब्रेन एज वेल एज लेफ्ट ब्रेन, दोनों का काम पूरे तरीके से होता है। मतलब कि जो क्रिएटिव थिंकिंग है वो बढ़ गई, लॉजिकल थिंकिंग है वो बढ़ गई, दोनों के बीच में एक बैलेंस क्रिएट हो गया। और बिजनेस में और चेस में ज्यादा फर्क नहीं है, मैं हमेशा कहता हूं ये बात, ज्यादा फर्क नहीं है। मतलब कि जो इंट्यूशन है वो बढ़ गई कि क्या करूं अगला, जो स्ट्रैटेजी है वो भी बढ़ गई, वो पावर्स भी बढ़ गई, कंसंट्रेशन पावर्स बढ़ गई, ऑब्जर्वेशन पावर्स बढ़ गई, ध्यान को एक जगह पर एफर्टलेसली रोकना आ गया। तो यहां से ये मेरी फाउंडेशन है पूरी की पूरी। और बिना अपनी ऑब्जर्वेशन पावर्स के ऊपर काम किए, जिसको आप माइंड बोल सकते हो, बिना अपने माइंड को एक जगह पर टिकाए आप कोई भी काम करने निकल जाओगे, आप ज्यादा देर तक नहीं कर पाओगे बॉस। एक काम करोगे, एक फेलियर आया फिर हिल जाओगे, कोई प्रॉब्लम आई फिर घबरा जाओगे, कोई चीज सीखने जाओगे एकदम माइंड कहीं और भागने लग जाएगा। अपने माइंड को पूरी तरह से एक जगह पर रखना है, और बड़ी से बड़ी मुश्किल आ रही है उसको बिना डर के फेस करना है। ये चीजें कहां से आएंगी, जब तक बॉडी, माइंड और सोल इन तीनों का इंटीग्रेशन नहीं होगा, ये तीनों एक साथ काम नहीं करेंगे। आज जो हो रहा है हमारी सोसाइटी के अंदर की फिजिकल एक्टिविटी धीरे धीरे बंद होती जा रही है। टीवी, इंटरनेट, कंप्यूटर, मोबाइल, खेलना धीरे धीरे कम होता चला जा रहा है। इससे होगा क्या कि लाइफ में अगर कभी इन बच्चों को फिजिकली एक्सर्शन वाला कोई काम करना पड़ गया, क्या ये कर पाएंगे? नहीं कर पाएंगे। मतलब मेरी लाइफ की एक ऐसी स्टेज थी जब दिन में मिनिमम मैं 16 से 17 घंटे काम करता था, जब नया नया फोटोग्राफी का कोर्स किया था। निकला हुआ हूँ, 6 बजे घर से निकल गया, रात को 12 बजे घर में घुस रहा हूँ, 10 बजे घर में घुस रहा हूँ, 11 बजे घर में घुस रहा हूँ, लगा हूँ 4 किलो का कैमरा उठाया हुआ है, कभी यहाँ कभी वहाँ, कोई थकान नहीं। आप ये कह सकते हो कि दर्दें थी, थकान नहीं थी, क्योंकि आदत थी भाई।